Behind every amazing flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a behind-the-scenes look at new flavors and the chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders who create them. With your host, Emmanuel.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Flavors Unknown podcast. I am your host, Emmanuel Laroche. I have been in the food industry for more than 20 years, both in Europe and in the US. And every other week, I interview trending chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders around the US to discover their secret behind the scenes, share with you some interesting new locations, and find out the new flavors and ingredients they are experimenting with. If you are a first-time listener, welcome to the show. Last week was the part 2 of a recording that I've done with 3 chefs in Austin. Kevin Fink from Emer & Rye, Chef Andre Natera from the Fairmont Hotel, and Fiori Tedesco from the restaurant Locadoro. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast as you do not want to miss great episodes that are coming soon. Today, I have 2 guests on the show. They are couple in life and couple in the kitchen. Chefs Sayat and Laura Ozyilmaz from the Eastern Mediterranean restaurant Noosh in San Francisco. We talk about what it is to be a couple in life and in the kitchen. And obviously, we cover the richness of the food culture from the past Ottoman Empire. You can access the show notes at flavorsunknown.com and find the episode on the episode page. A little warning, about this recording. I really apologize in advance, for the sound of a door that is opening and closing at 2 or 3 different times in the show. It is with great pleasure that I welcome now both chefs on the show. Hi, I am really excited to have you both, on the show. So welcome to Flavors Unknown. I am very pleased to have Sayat and Laura from Noosh, a restaurant in San Francisco.
Hello. We're excellent.
Hi, we are super excited to be part of the show. Thank you so much for thinking of us.
You are a couple in life and in the kitchen. So I'm curious, how is it to be partner as a married couple and as well sharing, a kitchen?
It's really one of the most rewarding aspects of cooking at all at this point. We've been together for 5 years, and ever since we met, we've always connected intensely, professionally and emotionally. And it's just been a tremendous journey to do everything with Laura. And of course, there's always compromise involved. We basically make sure that whatever the other person cares about, we don't interfere with too much. And if I care that some desserts are not as sweet as some other chefs do, Laura lets me be, that kind of thing. So there's always a compromise here and there.
Laura, what's your point of view?
It takes a lot of energy to, on top of that, separate our relationship from the restaurant because, we sleep together, we work together, we do everything together. And at the end of the day, whenever we have to solve an issue, we become business partners. So I'll say most of the times we are business partners. And when we go home, it's really hard to separate. But I think we are getting there. We're not experts doing this. I think we're in the process of finding the right balance. And I think it will be hopefully anytime soon.
So how do you find this, as you just mentioned, this balance between, the professional aspects and the private aspects? Do you have any tips?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We try to separate completely from food. It's very hard for us to separate from something that you're very passionate about because we both love food. And whenever we have a second, it's very interesting to see that we get excited about the same ingredients, the same restaurants. I think finding the channels like being with family and being with friends has been the best way for the two of us.
I'm guessing everything is good when, everything goes well at the restaurant, but when there is some difficult moments, so how do you keep the cool?
Yeah, our crisis management toolbox is ever expanding. I think we both are, very good at some things, and if one of us is better at one other something, that's the person who goes and solves that particular problem. But at the end of the day, we've found that de-escalation in any situation is our best tool, and therefore we know better not to escalate situations, basically. So
Sure.
It's just a lot less energy intensive if we solve things calmly, and we basically learned it the hard way, if you will, and we handle things quite effectively at this point.
Sayat, so you are Armenian from Turkey, and Laura, you are from Mexico. So how are you merging these two cultures, like the Eastern Mediterranean and the Mexican culture? And especially interesting is how do you translate this, in your way of cooking?
It's been very interesting for the two of us, especially for myself, because, I'm cooking food that's not from my culture. And I have learned to embrace it so much and to immerse myself in the culture in a way that I just take it as if it was my own culture. This has been a long process, and I think I'll tell you the long story. We started with stages. We staged for our honeymoon, and along the honeymoon, we basically, found out that nobody was doing anything fun with Middle Eastern cuisine. And we just decided to start building our concept based on that, based on exploring the ingredients, based on just, bringing the Middle East or the Eastern Mediterranean to whatever place we chose to stay on. So we chose San Francisco. I don't think we are merging the two concepts right now or the two cultures. I think what we're doing is I have embraced the culture by itself so much that, I've been so involved with the techniques, with the ingredients. This is something that we want to apply in the future. This is something I don't want to give up our news or anything, but I think this is something that possibly in the future we'll be working on and just working in one concept where we emerge the two cultures.
When did you fell in love with, I'm not talking about Sayat, but I'm talking about like the Eastern Mediterranean culture and food. Is it before you met him?
Yeah, absolutely. It was way before I met Sayat. Actually, I had one of my best friends, Turkish, and I met her in culinary school, and, seeing her such a strong woman, and she was just so impressive to see. She was very young when I met her. She was just very passionate. And I realized it was a culture by itself. And I went on a trip to Istanbul with my mom and my best friend. And I basically fell in love with it. And I told my mom, I'm going to get married with a Turkish guy. And that's what I did. Yeah, no, I'm not kidding.
How old were you at that time?
So I was about 19 years old when I did it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and it happened. Wow.
It happened,
That's a very nice story.
And that's like pretty much the only thing that I got out of being Turkish too. So you got to realize how lucky I am, and that she had her eyes on my culture, and then she found me along the way, and I scored.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's a great story.
As far as the merging of the cultures, the way I look at it is Laura is not just an amazing cook, but she's also a great businesswoman. So I always look at it as, she's making a compromise by signing up to this other culture that it's somewhat exotic, but at this point super familiar. But also she found the opportunity, as she identified on our honeymoon trip, that, nobody's doing anything fun with Middle Eastern food. And therefore we're like, let's focus on it. Let's develop it. And, let's create something that is unique and powerful and tells a compelling story, because, hummus is hummus, but, hummus with a story is a lot more convincing than hummus without a story.
So why San Francisco? Because were you based in San Francisco yourself, or?
No, we were actually living in New York. Like I said, we met in culinary school. Sayat and I met in culinary school. After a couple months of knowing each other, he basically moved in with me. And, he proposed after 6 months.
I understood that. He was Turkish. So here we go.
Yeah, no, it was an easy decision for the two of us.
That was written in your story.
Yes, that's right. everything happened really fast. And during our honeymoon, we said, okay, we just want to start building our family. We want to go and find the right place for the two of us. We do not only want to build our family, but also we want to build our career as a chefs, and also as a business entrepreneurs. We went all the way from New York and we came to San Francisco. Our goal was basically San Francisco, but also we said within the two of us, if we find a city that we like along the way, we will stay. We're just going to go to the city that we feel is the best place for the two of us. And at the end, it was San Francisco. We decided that it was the right place, the right weather, and the right people. So we absolutely love to be here.
So can you explain to me and to the listener what Noosh is about?
Noosh is a cohesive Eastern Mediterranean concept that elevates the simplest foods from the region into a story that basically resonates with the Californian culture. By that, I mean, it's not just a Middle Eastern restaurant, but it's a Middle Eastern restaurant Eastern Mediterranean restaurant with an Eastern Mediterranean wine menu, Eastern Mediterranean tea menu, non-alcoholic beverage menu, a hospitality that showcases that understanding of the guest, an atmosphere that celebrates it. We have olive trees that put the shade, in the afternoon into our bar, and it's one of the most gorgeous times during the day. Our wide open windows just let the breeze in on a cool day in San Francisco, and it's one of the most amazing feelings. It just feels like you're in the Mediterranean. We named the restaurant after my grandmother. We care about cultural anchors, something that sort of rests in history and culture in a logical place. And Noosh is, not just an Armenian and Greek word, but it's also a Farsi word that is part of an expression that means cheers. Noosh Jan is how you basically say salud, Farsi. And we just get really excited about this word that has so many cognates in Middle Eastern languages that, everybody can relate to.
So one of the things that I would like to add to that is thinking about the restaurant and thinking about the concept. One of the mottos for me and Sayat has always been, we want to serve food that we want to eat ourselves. And I think this is basically what we're doing. And it was also a challenge for the two of us going into a city where in San Francisco, everything is a little bit expensive. It's not easy to find good food at a good price. And we just basically decided to use our skills as chefs to develop a menu where we could serve like amazing food from the Middle East and offer a really great experience to the community. And, we came to this point. We came to concept where we are focused on value, we're focused on community, and we're also focused on cultural anchors. So we're very excited about the restaurant.
One thing I would like to expand on is the region is a conflicted region. We've expanded these boundaries that existed only after the beginning of the 20th century and created a borderless cuisine that celebrates the whole region. But that also comes with a huge we're breaking a lot of walls in people's minds. And it means you're serving Hungarian wine with Turkish food. You're putting Moroccan preserved lemons on a lamb kebab, and, a Georgian dish is shaped like a Turkish flatbread. People are getting really confused. And I think our staff basically untangled all of it in explaining and scripting everything to the guests. And I think that idea of borderless cuisine and the value we bring by expanding it to not just food, but also the wine menu, the cocktail menu, the non-alcoholic beverage menu, and being able to explain these sort of relationships to guests has been the biggest way we've elevated casual Middle Eastern food to a higher level.
We have seen really Eastern Mediterranean food really being a huge trend currently in the US. There's been a lot of fast casual restaurants serving Middle Eastern food, Mediterranean food. It's everywhere. So why do you think food coming from this region of the world resonates, with the American consumer today?
We get very excited about the cuisine by itself, and we get very excited about that we're not touching only the Middle East, we're also touching all the Eastern Mediterranean, and what it means, we're touching parts of all the Caucasus, and we're touching all these Middle Eastern countries at the same time. And the cuisine by itself was based on really good and pure ingredients, just like olive oil. We were very excited that basically more than 50% of the menu can be executed and can be presented to a vegetarian person. So I think people love that. People love place where they can have fresh ingredients, especially in California. And, you're eating good, healthy food, and it's not overwhelming.
One of the ways I think about it is obviously there was a huge movement with, now this is passé to talk about, but Chipotle basically was a trailblazing organization, and it started with Mexican food, and obviously all the entrepreneurs, it took them 5-6 years to get their ducks in a row, but all the entrepreneurs were like, oh, let's do it with Middle Eastern food, why not? So there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have kind of broken the code to Middle Eastern food, or as they think, and they're just serving hummus with toppings and or opening a shop that just serves hummus, which are all great ideas, and some of the food is delicious out there. What I get excited about is the concept from the perspective of a Middle Easterner who used to be an economist and now is a chef, is this idea of flavor per dollar. So if you think about the cuisine, you can buy a lot of flavor per dollar because of the spice mixes, because of the olive oil that Laura was talking about, that, hummus and bread by itself is just the most comforting thing. But if you're having a lamb kebab, like with one skewer, with 50 ounces of product, 50 grams of product or 2 ounces of product, you can basically have so much flavor that you'll be saturated, that you don't need an entire steak to sort of fulfill you, which is obviously, a Western invention, having a giant piece of steak on a plate. Going back to these cultures and finding different ways of addressing dietary needs, I think will diversify the ways we solve the problem of putting food on the table. And I think the way that Middle Eastern food is getting celebrated so widely is a great trend. If you think about the the sustainability and environmental impact, hummus, it's negligible compared to a piece of protein.
What are those key flavors or dishes, spices, the aromatics that are really characteristics from, that region that we can describe as maybe the former Ottoman Empire? Can you talk to us a little bit about this? Because it's very rich.
Absolutely. I think it's very broad to talk about the Ottoman Empire. There's specific dishes and spices, but, we get very excited about all of them. I think when you talk about the Ottoman Empire food, you talk about 4 seasons as well. So there's a lot of preservation, because they have a really hot summer and also they have a really cold winter. And you have fresh ingredients at the same time. One of the key flavors and how I will describe the food by itself, a lot of, for instance, when you go to Spain, you have the sofrito base. And when you go to Mexico, we use some spices and, we use a lot of onions and garlic at the same time. In the Ottoman Empire food, you go to pepper paste. I think they use a lot of peppers and, they do the harvest for the peppers. And, there's even, almost kind of a ritual when you get all the peppers and then you dry the peppers out and you get this amazing pepper paste that they use for the rest of the year. At the same time, you have all the kebabs, you have the spices, you have the stuffed vegetables, and they are crazy about the desserts and the sweets. They love everything extremely sweet, so it can be preserved for the full year. We were just in Turkey and we had an experience where we had a baklava. And, coming from the States and having a dessert so intense, it was a little bit overwhelming for the two of us, but we still get very excited about all those ingredients.
So what are the spices? You mentioned spices. What are like the key spices? And then you guys are doing, are working as well, with spices producers, and you're doing blends, correct?
Yeah, yes. We have about 12 blends at the restaurant. The way I think about it is that, there are a couple of uniting factors across the Mediterranean, from Morocco to Cyprus, Lebanon, and, encompassing Italy, Spain, and southern France and Portugal, and all the way to Turkey. So one of the ways for us, as far as identifying these key ingredients from the Ottoman Empire and the Eastern Mediterranean, has not only been to sort of find the common denominators, but also to identify what differentiates us from the rest of the Mediterranean. Because, obviously culturally, Italy, Spain, and southern France have a huge dominance on, a lot of people's perception on Mediterranean flavors. So when you look east, so what is different? So we try to keep, for instance, rosemary out of our repertoire because it's so Italian. And that's replaced immediately with oregano and thyme, and all of the spice mixes that this oregano and thyme are in are just incredibly potent and basically transform the ingredients. So like Laura said, we have a couple items in our repertoire, and I'm calling it repertoire, but we're really talking about a pantry, right? So you build the fundamental building blocks of your cuisine by identifying those key ingredients that are so important to you. And sumac, so we're talking about sesame, we're talking about thyme, we're talking about Aleppo pepper, Urfa pepper. Urfa pepper is something we're both in love with. This is a raisiny pepper that's similar to the ancho. A lot of folks who are in the food industry are very familiar with it. But, until this incredibly smart Turkish importer in the United States basically marketed it as Urfa and Aleppo pepper and Marash pepper, nobody was really aware of those products, and they've got so much potential. There's something called Kameli Suneli from Georgia that we fell in love with. It's a floral aspects there's marigold flowers in there. There is blue fenugreek. It's a milder fenugreek. There is coriander in the spice mix. So you have a fruity spice, you have an earthy spice, and you have a floral spice. And to me, just the idea of combining those three ingredients is amazing.
One of the other spices I would like to talk about, like Sayat talked, it's Kaneli Suneli. Kaneli Suneli is actually a spice mix from Georgia. And Georgia is the only country that uses marigold flowers as a part of their cuisine. And, the reason why I get very excited about it is because we use marigold flowers in Mexico for rituals and for ceremonies, and you see it on the streets. And, it was very interesting to me to see they actually dry the flower and they just grind it and they use it in the soups. They use it in the sauces. I'm in love with it. The other spice mix that I think we appreciate, it's fenugreek. And there's a type of fenugreek that I love. It's called blue fenugreek. It's a milder fenugreek. And like I said, it's the same. It's absolutely stunning. You get the notes of the fenugreek, but a little bit toned down. So you can use a little bit more of it, and it just goes great with any sauce.
Any sauce for what kind of food then?
We are using it right now for a sauce that's called ajika. Ajika is a sauce from Georgia, and the base is peppers and walnuts. So you get deep flavors from the marigold powder and from the fenugreek. That's, the mix is called Kaneli Suneli. We use a little bit of pomegranate molasses. We use 2 different types of pepper paste, and we use walnuts. So it's amazing.
So when you have all of this at your disposal, and then we are talking about, tradition here, obviously, with dishes, coming from that area. I'm curious about how do you approach your creative process? Because the inspiration comes from, from the region and the produce that you have, but what's the spin, that from a creativity standpoint? So I'm curious about how do you approach this?
When we're talking about serving 4,000 guests out of a kitchen in a city like San Francisco, we're really putting a target of what we want to achieve in front of us, and we're building the process around it. In the context of fine dining, we were a lot less limited at the restaurants we're working because We could throw 3 people at a dish and have them spend 4 or 5 minutes on average on a single plate. But we don't have that luxury in an environment where we're trying to focus on value. So the creativity comes in a lot of different ways. So a lot of the focus of our creativity has been on basically providing that value Laura has alluded to in the beginning of the interview. So it's a process improvement. Obviously, there's a lot of flavor creativity. So every single kebab on our menu has its own sauce, its own spice mix. The flatbreads are very similar to a pizza eating experience, but none of the flatbreads have a pizza-like flavor profile. They're all very unique. The sandwiches are each hyper designed to a T. Like, we haven't changed a single bit about every one of them. And it's the same goes to our, the texture of our hummus. Sometimes creativity means holding back on the different aspects of an item, like, the garlic content, or whether you're adding flavorings to a hummus, to just showcase how beautiful and smooth and light a hummus can be, to be able to highlight that one thing that matters the most. So curtailing on creativity is sometimes, in this example, the most important thing as well. So we use creativity with a side of caution in that way.
One of the fun parts of this process is that we are challenged all the time. Just like Sayat said, we have a couple of points or targets that we have whenever we're creating a dish. It has to be seasonal. It has to be, of course, Middle Eastern. It has to be easy to execute at the same time. And if it doesn't meet all these 3 angles, we're just not going to put it on the menu. We're not even thinking about creating a dish. So it's been a fun process. We need to make it work for the kitchen. We need to make it work, of course, for the clients. We still are creative and we are still using our culinary skills.
If we take one of the dish that I've tasted when I was at your restaurant, which was fascinating to me, and I really love that dish, which is the mint yogurt broth that you serve. So explain a little bit what it is first, and then, what is like the traditional aspect, coming from that region, and what is like the creativity aspect that you guys have put together in that dish?
So this is a dish that has not permeated through the United States or even Europe, because it is not just endemic, but it's also hard to do and scale. One of the things that's very special about it, it's like something that you would eat at home. You wouldn't even see it in restaurants, because it has to be sort of composed à la minute, as we say. There is a liaison, coming from French culinary terms. It involves an egg yolk and the tempering of the egg yolk and bringing it up to temperature in a very careful way. Because yogurt breaks, to stabilize the yogurt, you have to go into the process with a lot of care. So we're basically found a way to create this super rich flavored broth that has yogurt in it, and mainly spiced with dry mint, which is not a spice that we mentioned before, but it's something that we get really excited about. And it creates a tart, creamy experience that is comforting at the same time as being light. So that's comfort, and lightness is something that you only get from yogurt in the world of dairy products. And it's one of my favorite things about it. Traditionally, it's made with, a beef broth. We make it with a beef and lamb broth and cook it with short ribs. One of the most unique dishes that we serve on the menu. It's one of those things that is a family, I wouldn't say a family recipe, but a family experience. This is the flavor that I have in my head that Laura and I basically developed together to get to an optimum point that we appreciate. And what's fascinating to me is, obviously, a lot of folks in our kitchen are immigrants and, folks who've never tasted this food, but it's just been really interesting to see them cook it day in and out to our specifications. And we're just really proud.
That's a fantastic dish, I have to say.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, congratulations. They had amazed me. So do you think that, there's still like flavors, ingredients, or spices coming from that region that could be plentiful of, that are not yet celebrated. There's a lot of things still to discover.
Would you consider things that we're highlighting in our cuisine that nobody else is looking at as ingredients that are underutilized?
Yeah, I'm thinking this, or I'm thinking even like from the Ottoman, former Ottoman Empire. There's some great other ingredients or flavors or spices that you guys are maybe looking at and say, hey, that's other things that we need to explore and experiment with.
I would jump in anytime, but there are so many endemic cultures that haven't made it outside of their regions that are blessed with a lot of super unique ingredients. So for instance, we were in Armenia, and they have one of the most striking and easily overlooked ingredients when you go to the market. If you don't know how to speak Armenian, it's just very elusive, is aveluk. This is mountain sorrel, and they beat it into long strings, and they weave it into long strings, and they basically tie it into a circle. You could argue that it's a crown on an accessory for a dress or something. It's that beautiful. But it is an herb that basically, in its drying process, because it's being tied into such a thick knot, if you will, that it's fermenting. It tastes funky at the end of the day, but its predominant flavor is sorrel flavor, but it's incredibly earthy. And you braise it, you pickle it, you put it into soups, and it just, one of the things with soups is that you need hours of flavor development, right, to be able to get that deep, chicken stock or bone broth flavor. But this is like one of those things that can, like kelp, for instance, does the same thing to dishes, dry kelp, kombu. So it's one of those ingredients that captures so much flavor over its lifetime that by the time you add it to the soup, you don't have to add any other ingredients to it. So it's that unique of an ingredient. And I don't think, you mentioned supply, just you alluded to it at least. I don't know if this is plentiful in supply. I don't even know what the supply chain looks like for it, but it was an incredible ingredient that we were just blown away by. I know that's one ingredient that I talked about for a couple minutes, but there's just so many of these examples, like wild pistachios.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, a lot of different techniques that we haven't even explored. There are like different concepts as well. We just came back from, we took a couple of days off and we went to Armenia and we went to Istanbul. Just in Istanbul, every time we go, we just get amazed of the ingredients. There is something new. They're like, the whole process of, eating cheeses. And, there is like a different type of cheese and like different process for a different type of cheeses. There's this cheese that's amazing that we also use here at the restaurant that's called tulum. Halloumi we actually make, but I'm talking about another one. I think it's like the Parmesan of the Middle East. That's called tulum. So these sheep's milk cheese that's aged in the sheep's skin. So you get all these like flavors from the sheep, and literally it tastes like if you were eating or inside the sheep. They serve it and they mix it with walnuts. They mix it with nigella seeds. Just that cheese by itself. And, there's like all this marmalade. And yeah, we just are always so excited about new ingredients. And whenever we go or whenever we're doing a trip or we want to explore, of course, and we always find something new.
There's so much like potential in the region, and Noosh only features a limited version of these dishes and ideas and things that we're ever so excited to create more and explore more and share the wealth of the region and the creativity of the region that has stayed endemic way too long with the rest of the world too,
I was just thinking that, that's the part of the world that I had never been to. I just, went into like the border of Turkey, once, and I'm saying that, if you need someone to carry your luggages next time you go, you just like send me a text.
The number of trips we'll do is hopefully going to increase, and we want to do more for Turkey with Turkey as well as the rest of the region, Armenia too.
So I want to go back now a little bit on the approach and how you went into the business, because I think it's fascinating. I haven't read too much other people doing a lot of this, and I think it could be interesting for, people that are in culinary school where, you used to be, several years back. But you had a specific approach before creating, your own business. So you did a stage, almost like a tour, because I read that, you've been to like, I don't know how many cities, like 12 cities, and you focus on Michelin star restaurants, like 14 Michelin stars. So I'm curious, let's say, first of all, why staging?
This is so much fun to tell, whenever we're meeting somebody, and one of the first questions that we always get and people ask is, so where do you guys go for your honeymoon? And, we said, okay, we worked for our honeymoon. It wasn't easy for sure, but Sayat and I had a history of working in really good restaurants. We work for the best restaurants in the country. And of course, working for these restaurants, and I'll be very honest, and all your audience knows as well, we don't get paid much. And one of the reasons that we decided to go stage was because we wanted to try. We wanted to experience. We wanted to learn. The only way that you can do it, being a cook, is by working. So we just decided to go and work. We wanted to experience and get to try all these expensive restaurants and ideas and, get involved in something that we have never seen before. And the only way to do it was traveling and going and basically knocking at doors and going inside these restaurants and working for them.
So how do you establish your list? How do you make that list and pick and choose, the restaurant?
Appetite, really. Like, what do we want to eat? So what looks good, what's on the way, and who has the best reputation, and also who do we know? It was very organic. Sometimes we decided on the next city's restaurants a week out, but sometimes it took a lot of months of planning.
Okay. So who do you contact? I mean, I'm thinking about maybe some students that are listening to the podcast and say, that's a great idea. How do I do that?
We had a really great relationship with the Culinary Institute of America then. And also, like I mentioned, we work in great restaurants. We had a good resume, and, working in these restaurants, always like the restaurants want to help each other. The restaurants, cooks want to help the community. And I think whenever you go to a restaurant and you mention you're a chef or a cook, they take care of you. They understand what you've been through. It was just basically knocking at doors and say, hey, I work in this restaurant. I've been involved in these restaurants. And we were writing for a blog for the Culinary Institute of America. And we were writing about their experience. And everybody was so nice and open. And they let us be in their kitchens.
I would say, everybody needs to find their unique angle, right? So you want to provide, with just like the perspective of hospitality, you want to create value in every interaction you have with anyone that comes along your way. If you're thinking about an institution that, such as, let's say, August in New Orleans. So what can I give to these folks besides just my 8 hours of work to improve upon their reputation? So that's the angle that we found with that thought process by writing on the Culinary Institute of America's magazine, like alumni magazine. We basically provided them with an audience of potential employees. That was a very attractive proposal to a lot of these institutions that struggle day in and day out to find the right employee pool. Everybody has to find their right angle. Maybe it's somebody has a blog we also had a fairly effective Instagram account, or have an effective. So you have to build all aspects of what you're offering to the world in order to be able to make a compelling case. I think that's one of the hardest things about being a chef, in that you have to work all aspects of your life, be effective.
If you are thinking about not only the cooking aspect, but maybe more like the business aspects of things. So if there's any key learnings that you have discovered at a restaurant where you were doing the stages?
I mean, we're scratching the surface. We're really talking about a day or two stints at different restaurants. I think I'm always, obviously studied economics, but then switched to engineering. I always get impressed by process. It's one thing to be able to do one eggplant chip at a time for 30 people, but it's another thing to do that for 300 people perfectly. every evening. And Zeytinya was one of the most impressive restaurants to me, just because of the wealth and breadth of cuisine that they were putting into the restaurant, and how well things were executed, and how big a scale it was running at. I'm just, after Le Bernardin, I've just been so impressed by, processed restaurants that I got really excited about Zeytinya specifically. What do you think?
Yeah, that was a great restaurant. But I think going back to your question, what we learned, it was, I think, basically that we were very excited about building our own concept. I think this led to a point where we said, okay, let's just start something right away. I mean, I don't want to say we have all the experience in the world, but we have good experience, we have a good background, and we wanted to try. And I think this is the biggest learning. It was that we were eager to start, and that led us to start our concept right away.
Trying to pick up your brain and thinking about, the foodies that are listening, people like me, who are listening to the podcast, and say, what would be your suggestion, how a home cook, a foodie like me, can prepare, something which is inspired from the side of the Mediterranean, and what should they make, and what unique spin would you suggest, for them?
Absolutely. I think people that want to try Eastern Mediterranean food, or they want to start cooking, I think the right angle is to go and explore spices to begin with. I think the spices play a huge role with the cuisine. When you understand the spices and how they interact within each other, you can create something amazing. I think that'll be the right angle. The other thing, if you want to create like a special dish, of course, exploring the pantry of the Eastern Mediterranean or the Ottoman Empire, and just using them in a way that fits in with your city or your area where you live in. I think, we are lucky to live in California, and we are lucky to have our restaurant in San Francisco, where we can use amazing ingredients that you can find all year round in the Mediterranean. And also they're very seasonal. For instance, the Mediterranean has amazing tomatoes. In California, we have one of the best tomatoes in the world. And, when you use the right ingredient with the right techniques as well. For instance, if you want to do a dish that's Eastern Mediterranean or Turkish, we go for stuffing. I will go for stuffing vegetables. They use it, and whenever you're having a meal at breakfast, dinner, lunch, you'll find in the messes are like the small dishes or appetizers. You will always find a stuffed vegetable. So this is something that you cannot miss. Also, using the grilling and using all these cooking techniques, grilling kebabs and grilling fish, and using the pure ingredients by itself. I think this is something that you can just go ahead and execute.
If I make a grill, and then if I want to make a kebab, so what kind of spices should I use, together with it in order to have this, Middle Eastern or,
I think one of the most fundamental Middle Eastern flavor experiences is burnt oregano. So when a meat is marinated with a little bit of onion, oregano, and then chili, and then you throw it on the grill, and that oregano on the crust of the meat burns. This is very specific. But every time you eat a chicken kebab at my grandmother's home, you would always taste that burnt oregano that, was part of the grill marks on the chicken. And that's to me, that is one of the most fundamental flavors. So we're talking about, the flakes of oregano. I'm not talking about powder or anything like that. Even if you take a piece of T-bone steak and put oregano on both sides in addition to your salt, and I just do put away the black pepper just to put it in there, because it's a homogenizing spice and everything tastes the same if you use black pepper too much. So I would say cook a steak with just oregano and salt and see what that tastes like.
Yeah, I would like to finish with a series of rapid fire questions. So you're talking about learning how to blend the spices and work together. Is there a specific cookbook that you can recommend for people to get this inspiration around spices from Middle Eastern?
One of my favorite books is Istanbul and Beyond. The other one is My Turkish Cuisine. I think it's My Turkish Cuisine. The Black Sea is another one that I absolutely love.
I mean, the homage aspect of a lot of these books, it's not respectful enough towards spices. And I think that compels me to one day write a great spice book, talking about, but I get a little bit academic about these things. How do you cook a spice? How do you best extract its flavor? What kind of spice flavors are oil soluble? Which ones are acid soluble? So nobody really touches any of these things. I mean, even for the home cook, they just scratch the surface. If you were to pick up a McCormick bottle of spice that tells you the same information, do you really need one more book on your bookshelf? So I get frustrated with publishing companies from a distance. I don't know if they're the ones blocking it, but I think there's definitely a need for a better spice book.
So can you give me 3 dishes that you cannot live without cooking or eating?
I cannot live without Laura's black fidua. She makes a squid ink fidua that crisps on the bottom, and I just get really excited about it. It's a very Spanish dish, but it's something that either black rice or black fidua. It's something that I really enjoy. There's one dish that my mom makes. It's a börek, which is a stuffed phyllo dough pastry. It basically gets ground meat inside that's been refried before with onions and aromatics and everything, and then it gets super crispy, and then you serve it with garlic yogurt and tomato sauce. It's very comforting, and it's one of my favorite things in the world. And I think the third thing, I'll say a pilaf, and it's a very broad term for me. I love sushi rice just as much as I love my mom's rice, just as much as I love Laura's tomato rice. And I think a good rice dish that's unctuous, like a biryani or a tahdig from Iran or a gapama from Armenia, is always just some of the most comforting food in the world.
I will say, I cannot live without tacos because I'm Mexican. So I absolutely love tacos. I cannot live without tacos. But cooking, I think one of the most fascinating techniques that I learned in exploring Turkish food or Middle Eastern food is a technique that's called zeytinyağlı. It's actually a dish. It's basically when you cook any vegetable or any ingredient in olive oil. So what you do is you are basically poaching the ingredients in olive oil. So you have this experience of, for instance, eating artichokes poached in olive oil, and it's just absolutely amazing. I think it just intensifies all the flavors. I don't know. I think my third one, I cannot think of something that Sayat specifically makes for me, and I think I love absolutely everything that he makes. All his, he will make like eggplant stews, or he loves to make pilafs, and I love Sayat's pilafs. I like the most amazing pilafs. I think he was called the Rice Whisperer at Le Bernardin, and he was the Rice Whisperer.
Yeah,
I love that, but I think I also love simple ingredients cooked the right way. And I love grilled vegetables. I love grilled fish, and just grilled meats. I think just simple, good food. That's what I appreciate the most. Yes.
Good. So I want really to thank you both for your time. We have been talking here for a little bit more than an hour, believe it or not. And thank you so much for accepting to be both of you guests, on my podcast, Flavors Unknown. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We love being part of this. Thank you.
If you liked this episode with Chefs Sayat and Laura Ozyilmaz from Noosh, please share it with friends and ask them to subscribe to Flavors Unknown on Apple Podcasts or other phone podcast apps, as I always welcome new listeners to the show. If you are interested about some of the specifics that were mentioned by those two chefs from Noosh, you will find all the details on the show notes page at flavorsunknown.com. In 2 weeks, I will have a special guest. He's not a chef. He's not a bartender. His name is Flavien Desoblins, and he's the owner of the Brandy Library and Copper and Oak in Manhattan. He's an expert in the world of spirits. So we are going to talk a lot about alcohol in 2 weeks, and especially we will focus on bourbon. I see you in 2 weeks, and until then, remember that people who love to eat are always the best people.
You've just enjoyed another delicious episode of Flavors Unknown. Hungry for more? Hit subscribe. Tell us where you're listening from by leaving a review. And for social media and show notes, head to flavorsunknown.com.